Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into the invisible rules of motion that govern, well, absolutely everything around us. We're talking about the hidden architecture of movement, specifically pushes, pulls, and that ever-present force of gravity. Instead of getting bogged down in abstract theories, we're going to ground these physics concepts in the totally mundane things you do every single day. Trust me, there's some seriously complex mechanics hiding right in plain sight. So, to kick things off, pun definitely intended, picture yourself out on a field. Ask yourself, how exactly does a football move when you kick it? I mean, it seems simple enough, right? Your foot makes contact and bam, it soars toward the goal. But in that tiny split second, you're actually doing something pretty remarkable. You're transferring kinetic energy right out of your body and into the ball, totally overcoming its resting state and the downward pull of gravity just to send it flying. You're literally hacking your physical environment to get a specific outcome.
Now, on the flip side, think about the mechanics of opening a drawer. You reach out, yank the handle, and it slides right open. It's an action we perform all the time without a second thought. But physically speaking, what is that invisible mechanism tying your movement to the drawer? How does the transfer of energy work when your goal isn't to blast an object away from you, but actually to draw it inward, fighting against the friction of its tracks?
Well, the answer to both of those little everyday mysteries is a force. At its absolute most fundamental level, a force is simply a push or a pull. It's not some mystical, overly complicated equation locked away in a science lab. It's the literal foundation of how we navigate our world and manipulate mass. Anytime you interact with an object, you're applying a force to change its state of rest or motion. It is, for sure, the universal language of physical interaction.
Okay, so the crucial first piece to understand here is that a push is a force that moves an object away from your body's center of gravity. Whenever you exert energy to create distance between yourself and something else, you're pushing. You are initiating an action to displace that object, actively fighting against environmental pushback, things like surface friction, air density, or gravity, just to force that mass into a brand new position in space. Think about being in a playground. When you push a swing, you aren't just shoving it away. You're actually applying an upward and outward force to counteract gravity and build up momentum. And honestly, the exact same principle applies whether you're applying enough force to overcome the friction of a heavy door to shut it, kicking that football across the field, or just pushing a loaded shopping cart down the grocery aisle. You are actively commanding mass to move away from you. Now, conversely, a pull is a force that does the exact opposite. If a push is all about establishing distance and throwing energy outward, a pull is 100% about closing that distance. You're anchoring your body and drawing something in the external world right toward your own center of gravity. You become the focal point, and the energy you generate collapses the physical space between you and whatever you're pulling on. You're actively using this kind of force when you fly a kite, pulling the string to keep tension against the chaotic force of the wind. You use it when you're dragging a heavy suitcase through the airport, battling the rolling friction and the downward weight. Or think about a game of tug-of-war. You are exerting massive amounts of energy to draw that rope towards you, totally fighting the opposing force generated by the other team. And all of this perfectly illustrates the absolute difference between our two main categories of forces. A push dictates movement that goes away, and a pull dictates movement coming closer. Every single interaction we ever have with physical objects falls right into this constant, unavoidable dance of pushing and pulling. It's basically a binary system of outward projection versus inward attraction that runs the entire foundation of classical mechanics. But here's the thing. Forces do so much more than just kickstart movement from a standstill. They are the ultimate directors of how things behave in physical space. They make objects accelerate, decelerate, or just completely change their path. You use force to catch a fast-moving baseball, absorbing all that intense momentum to bring it to a dead stop. Or you use force to deflect something rolling towards you, totally shifting its direction. Simply put, if you want a physical state to change, you need a force. Let's look at a fun little mental experiment to see how effort and momentum are connected. Imagine putting a small toy car on a flat table. If you give it a gentle push, it only moves a short distance before friction stops it, right? But if you give it a significantly stronger push, transferring a much larger amount of kinetic energy, that car is going to travel way farther and way faster. The input strictly dictates the output. This shows us a really fundamental rule in physics. The strength of the force dictates the scale of the effect. The amount of effort you put in directly translates to how dramatically the object reacts. A tiny push gets you a tiny movement, while a massive shove results in a huge leap in acceleration and distance. Grasping this proportionality is totally key to predicting how anything will behave when acted upon. Plus, we have to talk about mass, because mass changes everything. And this is exactly where gravity comes squarely into play. A box full of heavy books is being pulled downward by gravity much, much harder than an identical empty box. So when you try to push that heavy box, you aren't just moving it horizontally forward, you're actually battling the intense friction created by gravity pulling it down against the floor. That's exactly why you have to recruit significantly more force just to get the exact same movement.
Okay, so now that we've got the basics down on strength, mass, and gravitational resistance, let me throw a really fascinating question at you. Can the exact same object be both pushed and pulled, depending entirely on what the person doing it wants to achieve? Think about how we might manipulate identical objects in totally opposing ways.
The answer is yes, absolutely. A regular old door is a perfect, intuitive example of this duality. When you leave a room, you apply an outward push. But when you're standing out in the hallway, you pull that exact same door toward you to close it. The mass of the door hasn't changed one bit, but the type of force you apply changes entirely based on your relative position and what you're trying to get done.
You see, forces truly are the invisible framework of our reality. When you walk, you're actually pushing off the ground against the constant downward pull of gravity. Riding a bike, writing with a pencil, or even just yanking open a heavy fridge door, you are constantly calculating and applying specific forces to overcome resistance. Our everyday lives are just an endless, highly coordinated series of pushes, pulls, and ongoing negotiations with gravity just to move smoothly through space.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to lock in these core principles to really make sense of the physical world. Number 1, motion is dictated by forces, which are basically just pushes or pulls. Number 2, a push moves mass away from you. Number 3, a pull draws mass closer to you. And finally, all of these actions require varying levels of energy depending on the object's mass and how hard gravity happens to be pulling down on it at any given moment.
The next time you go about your day, whether you're just strolling down the street or pushing open a door, I challenge you to take a second and recognize the invisible physics at play. Ask yourself, what forces are you using right now? What resistance are you overcoming? And how exactly are you choosing to move the world around you? By understanding the mechanics of motion, you unlock a much deeper appreciation for the physical world. Keep observing and keep questioning.